Resident Evil 3 is a remake of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis from 1999, and it's also a sequel to Resident Evil 2, which is a remake of Resident Evil 2 from 1998. Remakes. Yeah. Because game developers are running out of ideas and they're remaking their games. Apparently Super Mario 64 is also getting a remake. I don't have a problem with that at all, actually. Give me Super Mario Sunshine, for sure. Also, guys, if you haven't noticed yet, I am filming in 60 frames per second right now. After I did my review for Doom Eternal, I looked back at that video and I was very happy with the review itself. However, I filmed it in 24 frames per second, which is usually what I do for my movie reviews. But then when I started importing the footage from the game, I started realizing that it wasn't really showing off the high quality of the game. So I was kind of disappointed with that aspect, but I was happy with the review overall. So to show off the quality of the game, I'm gonna film this review in 60 frames per second, and if you guys like that, let me know in the comments down below, so maybe like in the future, if I do another game review, I will start filming these in 60 frames per second. I don't know, just let me know what you guys think. It's just something that I'm trying out specifically for this video. It's kind of a test run, so yeah. So Capcom has been doing this thing for the past 3 years where they're trying to revitalize Resident Evil, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. The movies are actually very inaccurate towards the games, so I've come to realizing. I actually started playing Resident Evil 7 back in 2017, and that game terrified me. That made me realize that Resident Evil isn't just this action-oriented franchise. It's actually like a horrifying thing. I actually got chills playing that game. And then when I found out they were releasing Resident Evil 2, a remake of Resident Evil 2 from 1998 in 2019, I was really excited, actually. I heard that was like the best one, and I played it. I never did a review on it. I wish I did, because the game was probably my favorite game of 2019. I thoroughly enjoyed that game. I love the characters, Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. I actually played both the stories in Resident Evil 2. I played as Leon Kennedy the first time I got the game. And then when I heard that they were remaking Resident Evil 3, I went back and I played as Claire Redfield because I wanted to beat the game fully. And I'm really glad that I did that, because there's a little nod to Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 that I really want to get into. It's kind of a spoiler, so I'm going to wait till like more into the review before I get into that. But yes, Resident Evil 2 was my favorite game of 2019. It was a scary, horrific game that I wanted to stop playing sometimes when I got to like horrific parts, like Mr. X, but I would always go back to the game to play it because I wanted to beat it, and I felt so fulfilled when I beat the game. Twice, actually. I went through that twice. That's commitment right there. So when I heard that they were remaking Resident Evil 3, I was pretty excited because I know Nemesis is an icon of the game. He's like one of the most known villains in the Resident Evil franchise. If you don't even play Resident Evil, you know that face. If you think of Resident Evil, you're like, oh yeah, Nemesis. Like besides zombies, like that guy, he's horrifying. So people were actually looking forward to a remake of Resident Evil 3. And I was actually surprised that it came out a year after Resident Evil 2. That was very quick. And you know, we'll get to that later because I kind of feel as though it's a slight negative. But overall, this game is really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually have been playing it for the past 2 nights. And even though I like Resident Evil 2 a little bit more than this game is much more entertaining than Resident Evil 2. There's a lot more stuff going on, and I feel as though there's a lot more mechanics that they added onto this game that make it more flexible and playable in a sense. In this game, you play as Jill Valentine, one of the main characters from the first game, who's trying to expose the Umbrella Corporation for creating this virus that happened at the mansion in the first game. And now this virus has been released in Raccoon City. Zombies are amok. And there's also this creature called Nemesis who is stalking you, just like Mr. X, who was stalking Leon Kennedy or Claire Redfield in Resident Evil 2. I almost said the first game, but Resident Evil 2, the first remake game. And yeah, I really enjoyed this game, much like the first one, Resident Evil 2. Can I call it the second one? Yeah, the second one. In the second game, you were playing as Leon Kennedy, who was a rookie cop, and this random girl who had no military experience whatsoever, as far as I know, who just had a gun, who just went out to look for her lost brother from the first game. Whereas in this one, you are playing as military personnel. Jill Valentine is a star, and we also have Carlos, who is working for the Umbrella Corporation. These characters know what they're doing in this game. There's actually a mechanic that Jill Valentine has where if a zombie is coming near her, or if it's Nemesis, she can actually roll and dodge some of the attacks or some of the bites from the zombies, which I really liked. I just liked how you could dodge zombies in this one. In the second one, I was just being bit by zombies all the time. And Carlos actually has this ability where he can punch zombies. So it was really cool just to have these added-on bonuses to how you could fend off the zombies and survive the night. Exploration is still a really big deal in this game, where you're having to sustain your ammo and health items, and you're trying to find anything that you can to survive throughout this game, because you're in the middle of this thing in Raccoon City where zombies are everywhere. And one of the things that I will mention about this game that is very different from the second one is, even though I would still classify this game as a horror game, obviously, there's a lot of action elements. A lot of fans consider the new Resident Evil games as very action-oriented because of the movies right there. The movies decided to be Matrix ripoffs, and because of that, it really affected the franchise. After Resident Evil 4, it started getting really action-oriented, but you can see in this third one that even though it was a horror game, they were still trying to implement some kind of action features. There's barrels everywhere in the city where you can blow up. It helped me thoroughly throughout this entire game, because if I was swarmed by zombies, I could just shoot that barrel and it would blow the zombies up. It's just not really subtle. You can tell that they're really trying to make this game a little bit more, like I said, action-worthy, which I don't really have a problem with, because I will say this in the game's defense. These are military personnel. You are dealing with the military aspect of this game where, you're kind of working alongside Umbrella soldiers. So it makes sense that there is some action stuff going on. It makes sense that you are given a machine gun. You are basically a soldier for hire.
Sorry. It's my turn, bitch!
Like the second game, these characters are incredibly lighthearted. I liked just about everyone in this game, except for the villains, obviously. But the main characters, Jill Valentine and Carlos, who I thought I wasn't gonna like at first, but as the game progresses, he's a cool dude. Like, when we go from Jill to Carlos in the game, I not only like playing as him because he has the machine gun, he's just a cool dude. There's actually a scene in the game where I don't really want to get too much into spoilers, but he says exactly what the audience is thinking. You know what? I will go into it because the game is fairly old and you guys probably know about this section of the game. So if you don't want to hear the spoiler, it's in the middle of the game, so it's not really a spoiler, but this is a potential spoiler. This game takes place before and during the events of Resident Evil 2, so there is actually a section in the game where you go back to the police station before Leon Kennedy gets there. Certain questions about the police station in Resident Evil 2 are answered in Resident Evil 3. Like, for instance, why this wall is blown up over here, why there's this dead corpse at the corner of this room. I think it was just like my favorite portion of the game because it was so familiar, and it was also so unnerving because you know what's about to happen at this police station, and these guys, these Umbrella soldiers, have no idea what's going to be happening. Like, I just thought that was really cool. And like I said, Carlos says what the gamer is thinking. He goes up to a door that has like the weird logo, like, because, you know, you have to get a key that has the same logo. And he goes up to this door and says this.
Now here's a weird fucking door.
Leave it. We're here for Bard.
And like I said, you go from playing as Jill to Carlos, like in your first run through of the game. There's no two stories. It's all one story. You switch from Jill to Carlos in certain sections of the game. And I will say that's probably one of my main negatives of the game is it's all one game. You can play it a second time, but you're not playing as different characters. In the second one, you could play as Leon Kennedy, and you ran into Claire sometimes, but you never played as Claire. But when you were done playing as Leon Kennedy, you could play the game again as Claire Redfield. It was the same game, but it was two different stories. Different things happened to these characters. In this game, you play as 2 different characters, but it's within the same story. It switches back and forth. Obviously, you can play the game again a second time, and what the game does offer is the shop feature, which allows you to complete certain challenges and gain points. And when you gain these points, you can buy costumes or certain guns. So that is one of the reasons why you would play this game a second time. However, I do need to say this as well. The game is incredibly short. I actually beat this game in 4.5 hours. And that's saying a lot, actually, because when I played as either Leon or Claire in the second one, it took me about 7 to 8 hours to complete each of those campaigns. So that would be a total of 14 to 16 hours combining those 2 stories. But in this one game, I beat it in 4.5 hours. This game is short. Yeah, that's one of the negatives that I will have to say, is that I completed this game in such a short amount of time. Maybe it's because I played the second one and I knew how to combine items and I knew what I was doing, but it's short. It's a really short game. I can't sugarcoat it enough. And I'm sure you guys want me to talk about Nemesis. Nemesis is scary in this. Nemesis is really horrifying. He provides a lot of the coolest cutscenes in this game. As you progress in this game, this thing is following you when you're Jill Valentine. When you're Carlos, it's fine. So at least I had a breather where I was like, okay, I'm Carlos. Like, Nemesis isn't gonna follow me. But when I switched back to Jill Valentine, I was like, oh God, there's that probability. This thing mutates and adapts to the environment so it can complete its mission to catching Jill Valentine. And that was actually the most horrific part in this game, was seeing this thing take on different forms to complete its mission of catching Jill Valentine. However, I do have to say this, I think I'm more scared of Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 more than Nemesis. Nemesis visually is a more horrific looking character, but Mr. X, that thing was following you the entire time you were at that police station in the second one. Whenever you're trying to find certain items and combine certain things, you're at that police station throughout the majority of the game, and Mr. X could be in the other room, and there was always a likelihood that he could get you. That was the most horrific part of Resident Evil 2, was this thing was always following you. It was constantly trying to figure out where you were in this game. Whereas in Nemesis, like I said, is horrifying, but he's more of a cutscene. He's more of a sequence in this game where when he appears, it's not constant. It's not like, oh, Nemesis is over here, I can go to this room and, continue out my mission. When he appears, it's a signal that, okay, you need to get out of here, you need to go to the next location. It's part of the story. It's part of just the sequence of events going from beginning to end, which I was a little bit disappointed in. I will have to say it was a bit of a relief that he wasn't following you the entire time as you're trying to find certain items in the game. But I will say, as a game mechanic, even though I didn't really enjoy Mr. X, no one really enjoys Mr. X, but that's the point. Mr. X worked. Mr. X works more than Nemesis. That's all I'm trying to say. And going back to my critique of this game being incredibly short, you can tell that they knew that the game was really short because they added this feature, Resident Evil Resistance, to the game so you could have your disc in your PlayStation more. That multiplayer is actually really interesting. I've played it a couple times. I don't know if I'm going to be playing it again, but I can see where if someone beat the campaign of Resident Evil and they wanted that Resident Evil feel, they wanted to keep on playing the game and they wanted to play with others, I can see where the multiplayer would come in handy. But in my eyes, I see that they added this multiplayer just so they could make the game have a longer playtime, in my opinion, because this game is really short. That's my only negative with it, and my minor negative with Nemesis, that's my main thing, is the game is just so short that I beat it in 4.5 hours. It's pretty clear that they saw that Resident Evil 2 was a huge success, and they were like, oh, we have like this other title with this mainstream villain, Nemesis, let's remake that. And I don't know, I don't want to say it's rushed, because it's a really well-looking game, but it does kind of feel at times like it's just this big DLC. There, I said it. I'm gonna get a lot of hate. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very entertaining. I liked it as much as Resident Evil 2. I like Resident Evil 2 more. It's just, this game has a lot more features like, you know, dodging zombies and more action-worthy stuff that really make it stand on its own. It's just a different game. It's the same universe and it's the same game in terms of mechanics. There's just different stuff happening which kind of changes the tone of it. You've got machine guns and exploding barrels, and, you know, it's a good change of pace. Like, people would complain like, oh, it's just the same game. At least they added different features to make the game stand out on its own. So I will give them that, for sure. If you're a fan of Resident Evil, I would definitely recommend this game. I very much liked it. These are all minor nitpicks. It's just too short. That's all I gotta say. I'm definitely curious to see where this franchise is going, because they're on a roll. Like, Resident Evil 7 was good, Resident Evil 2 was good, this was good as well. Apparently there is a Resident Evil 8 coming out next year. I have no idea which direction they're gonna go with that, if they're gonna go back to first person like Resident Evil 7, or a third person, or if they're also gonna remake another game. I don't think they're gonna remake another game. They're not gonna remake Resident Evil 4. Like, that's a masterpiece of a game. But I don't know, it's a curious thought. Like, now that they're done with the games that people wanted them to remake, well, what are they going to do next? I'm actually very curious. What do you guys think? Comment down below what you thought of Resident Evil 3. Comment where you think Resident Evil is going as a franchise. Like this video, share it, and please subscribe to Pixel Talk if you haven't yet for more movie reviews, game reviews, trailer reactions, movie news, and so on. Thank you guys so much. I am Corbin Stuckey, and this is Pixel Talk.